What if I told you America's first real crime syndicates didn't just fight the government, they worked with it? Politicians who needed votes, police chiefs who needed bribes, military officials who needed help during a world war. In the shadows, gangsters became businessmen, then power brokers, then something more dangerous. They became useful. Tonight on Ages Explained, we are not just asking how the mafia rose, we are asking something far more uncomfortable. How did American officials help build the first crime syndicates in the United States, and why did they need them? Stay to the end, because we will reach a moment where the U.S. Navy secretly partners with a mafia boss sitting in prison during World War II and later rewards him for it. But to understand how America reached that point, we need to go back. Before Lucky Luciano, before Al Capone, back to a time when the most powerful crime syndicate in America sat inside City Hall. In the 19th century, long before the word mafia meant anything in America, cities like New York already had something very close to a crime syndicate. It was not Italian, it was not Sicilian, it was political. Tammany Hall controlled New York City for decades. It was not simply a political organization. It was a system of power built on corruption. Tammany used gangs and street toughs to intimidate voters, break up opposition rallies, and control elections. In return, those gangs received protection from police, city contracts, and legal immunity. William Boss Tweed did not run a street gang. He ran a looting machine. His political rings stole the modern equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars through fake contracts and inflated bills. Police officers owed their jobs to Tammany. Judges owed their elections to Tammany. Licenses, permits, and city money flowed through the machine. If you ran a gambling house or an illegal saloon, you did not fear the law. You paid the law. This matters. Because long before Hollywood gangsters, American officials had already built a vertically integrated corruption system. From City Hall, through police, down into the streets. It looked like organized crime. The difference was that the men at the top wore suits, not fedoras. In 1920, the United States passed Prohibition. Alcohol became illegal nationwide. On paper, it was a moral crusade. In reality, it was a gift to organized crime. The law banned production, transport, and sale of alcohol. But enforcement was weak, underfunded, and divided between agencies that often hated the law. Millions of Americans did not stop drinking. They simply became customers of criminals. Prohibition turned alcohol into an industry controlled by gangs. In cities across America, police corruption exploded. Speakeasies kept payoff books listing which officers were paid and how much. Bribes were delivered weekly. Raids targeted competitors who refused to pay. Judges dismissed cases in exchange for envelopes. This was not isolated corruption. It was systemic cooperation. Every bribe accepted, every case dropped, allowed criminal groups to grow larger, richer, and more organized. And while Prohibition was enforced on paper, many politicians drank freely behind closed doors. That hypocrisy sent a clear message. Illegal did not mean forbidden. It meant profitable. By the late 1920s, bootleggers were no longer street criminals. They were employers, investors, political donors. And from this environment, one man reshaped crime forever. Charles Lucky Luciano did not invent organized crime. He modernized it. Luciano rejected old ethnic rivalries. He partnered with Jewish gangsters like Meyer Lansky. He believed crime should be run like a corporation. He helped create a national governing body known as the Commission. Different families controlled territories. Disputes were settled internally. Major decisions were made collectively. Violence became a tool, not a habit. To control docks, construction, trucking, and unions, Luciano needed more than guns. He needed influence. Union leaders were helped into power. Politicians received votes and donations. Police commanders learned which names were untouchable. Organized crime did not operate outside the system. It operated inside it. using lawyers, accountants, real estate, and political channels. By the mid-1930s, America had a shadow economy woven directly into official institutions. Then the state struck back, and later, it quietly came asking for help. In 1936, prosecutor Thomas Dewey put Lucky Luciano in prison. Unable to prove murder, Dewey targeted prostitution networks and won a conviction. Luciano received a sentence of 30 to 50 years. It looked like a victory for the law. Then World War II changed everything. In 1942, the United States feared sabotage in New York Harbor. That harbor was vital for sending troops and supplies to Europe. When a massive ship caught fire and capsized, panic spread. The docks were controlled by unions with deep mob influence. Instead of dismantling that system during wartime, U.S. naval intelligence chose another path. They contacted the mafia. Through intermediaries, they reached Lucky Luciano in prison. Luciano used his influence to stabilize the docks, prevent strikes, and identify threats. This cooperation became known as Operation Underworld. In return, his prison conditions improved. And after the war, his sentence was commuted. In 1946, Lucky Luciano walked free and was deported to Italy. The United States had partnered with a crime boss in a national emergency and then rewarded him. That is not conspiracy, that is documented history. Even after Luciano left, the system he helped build remained. Crime syndicates learned that the real power in America was not violence. It was unions, contracts, and votes. Control a union, and you control jobs, strikes, and elections. Politicians understood this reality. They tolerated corruption for labor peace and campaign support. Construction followed the same pattern. Mob-controlled companies added hidden costs to projects. Inspectors looked away. Permits flowed. Buildings rose with criminal profit embedded in their foundations. Crime and official power became interdependent. And at the federal level, there was silence. For years, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover downplayed the existence of a national mafia. He focused on communists and political radicals. Organized crime was treated as a local problem. Some historians believe Hoover feared exposing connections between mobsters and powerful officials. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Crime syndicates were given decades to entrench themselves. By the time the federal government acted seriously, the system was already deeply rooted. So how did American officials help build the first crime syndicates? They passed laws that created massive black markets. They normalized corruption at every level. They partnered with criminals when it was convenient. They relied on mob-influenced unions and businesses. And they looked the other way for far too long. America's first crime syndicates were not simply enemies of the state. They were partners, tools, and sometimes protectors of the state. That is the part of history rarely told. So the next time you hear about the mafia versus the government, remember this. It was never that simple. In future episodes, we will follow this story further, into elections, into cities like Las Vegas, into Cold War intelligence and power. If you want us to go there, let us know, because some of history's most dangerous alliances were never written into law. They were whispered behind closed doors. And they shaped America far more than most people realize.